Vanakkam, friends. On behalf of the Southern India Chamber of Commerce and Industry, SICCI, I would like to extend a warm welcome to our esteemed guest of today, Mr. T.S. Krishnamurthy, former Chief Election Commissioner of India. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to each one of you, our valued audience, for having dedicated the time to join us this morning. Wishing you all a very good morning today. SICCI, as most of you would be aware, has completed 112 years of service to industry, government, and society. And during these tremendous number of years, we have conducted so many different kinds of programs of value to each one of our stakeholders. We've had several guests join all our programs, and typically we find that our guests restrict their addresses to only 20 to 25 minutes of their time and just their area of focus. We, however, felt that quite a few of our guests have much more to offer than just their area of expertise. We felt that our guests would be able to share with us their all round path to success, share with us their inputs for the next generation, share with us their inputs for society. It is with that in mind that we came up with the concept of SICCI 360. And I'm extremely glad to share with you that we have just completed our second anniversary of SICCI 360. We started this program in October of 2020. And since then, we've had 24 esteemed guests across all walks of life who have joined us. We first started with Dr. Soumya Swaminathan. All of you would be aware, who's the chief scientist with the World Health Organization. We had Dr. C. Rangarajan, the former governor of the Reserve Bank of India. We then had Dr. V. Shanta of the Cancer Institute in Chennai. We followed it up with Mr. Sridhar Vembu, who's the CEO of Zoho Corporation. We then had a guest from the sports field, Mr. Vishwanathan Anand, the chess champion. We then had our President Emeritus, Dr. A.C. Mutaya, joining us. Our next guest was Mr. Gopal Krishna Gandhi, the former bureaucrat, IS officer, and diplomat as well. We also had a session with Mr. Krishnamurthy from the police force as well as a motivational speaker. We reached out to the Tamil diaspora in Malaysia by our guest from there, Tan Sri Dato Palan, who's a noted educationist in Malaysia. We had Dr. Pratap C. Reddy from Apollo Hospitals. We had Dr. Meena Mutaya, who's a noted educationist and correspondent of the Chettinad Vidyashram in Chennai. We then reached out to the Singapore diaspora, the Tamil diaspora in Singapore, through Ambassador Kesava Pani, who shared with us his path to success ever since his family moved out of Chennai and then they established in Singapore. So that was our first year. And then continuing on into our second year, we had Mrs. Shivashankari, the noted writer, orator, who shared with us various inputs for the benefit of society. We then had Dr. Vandana Gopikumar, who a noted social worker who's done a lot of work for destitute women. We then had Mr. Lakshmi Narayanan, a former CEO of Cognizant, the IT industry. I'm sure you're all aware. We then had Mr. N. Shankar, chairman of the Sanmar Group. Our first guest from the film world was Mr. S.P. Muthuraman, the noted director and producer. That was our first foray into the film world. We then had again another past president of ours, Mr. M. Rafiq Ahmed, who's the founder chairman of Farida Shoes, one of the major leather manufacturers in Tamil Nadu. We then had Dr. Jawar Palniappan, noted cardiologist from the US. We reached out to the US diaspora at that point of time. We also followed it up with Mr. M.R. Rangasamy, who's a noted entrepreneur, angel investor, as well as head of Indiaspora, who's been doing a lot of work in promoting the Indian American community in the US. We then, our first foray into the retail industry was with Mr. M. Hadevan of Hot Breads. We had our next speaker in Mr. M.K. Narayanan, who is the former National Security Advisor. We had our second sports personality, which is Mr. Vijay Amritraj, the tennis legend from India. And our last guest, session 24, was Mr. Vijay Iyengar, who heads an agro business out of Singapore and done extremely well, having migrated from India into Singapore. So with these extremely valued guests, we've had 24 extremely successful sessions, and each one of our sessions have been with an audience that is completely new to SICCI, we have noticed as part of the SICCI 360 program that based on the guest's profile, we are getting a new set of audience into SICCI, which is a huge benefit to us and also benefit to each one of our people joining us. We are now extremely glad that we are continuing forth into the third year with today's session, session 25. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, a few words about SICCI 360. As I said earlier, we started this program in October of 2020. It's a monthly series, and we've been running continuously since then. We orient this to be a lively discussion with our eminent guests, and each of our guests, as you would have seen by now, are guests who are experts in their respective fields, and they share with us their all-round paths to excellence. We typically look for guests who have at least 3 decades of industry and society contribution, and this is an apolitical platform, of course. We wanted to give it a name that depicts a multidimensional perspective, and that's how we came up with the 360 degrees branding. The format that we follow as part of this session, we have 5 distinct sections that we go over with each of our guests. We first start off with our guests' expertise. We then talk about our guests' organization and their role within the organization. The third is we talk about our guests' career path. Fourth, we talk about our guests' inputs for the next generation. And finally, we talk about our guests' inputs for society. We certainly encourage you, the audience, to participate along with us. There are 2 broad guidelines that we follow in this program. Number one is we do not want to make our guest uncomfortable at any point of time. We want our guests to be at comfort and ready to be able to join us again in the future. So we make sure that all our questions are oriented accordingly. Second is we definitely want you, the audience, to gain out of your participation here. So please feel free to share your comments on the online chat box, and our SICCI 360 team will be glad to take it forward for answering during the course of this session. I would also like to draw your attention to the names of 2 of our executives in the previous slide, in this slide. Please make a note of it. If any of you have any problem joining during the course of this call, please give our executives a call and they will be glad to assist you. With those few words about SICCI 360, I would now like to share a few words about our esteemed guest for today, Mr. T.S. Krishnamurthy. He was born in 1941. He did his high schooling in Baroda, and then he had a degree at St. Joseph's College in Bangalore. He's a gold medalist in history, economics, and political science at Mysore University. He finished his master's in fiscal studies from the University of Bath in the United Kingdom. He started his career as a probationary officer at Bank of India at age 19, and he joined the Indian Revenue Service in 1963. One of the key jobs that he had handled was Chief Commissioner of Income Tax in Bombay. He was deputed as DGM with the Hindustan Shipyard Limited in Visakhapatnam. He has held a number of, he served multiple ministries in New Delhi, including shipping and the finance ministries. He served at the Election Commission of India as commissioner since January of 2000, and he served as the 13th Chief Election Commissioner of India from February 2004 till May 2005. As a CEC, Chief Election Commissioner, he was sent as an observer to the elections in Zimbabwe, as well as the US presidential elections in 2004. In 2005, he was appointed by the Supreme Court of India to conduct the Board of Control for Cricket in India elections. He's been awarded the most admired Gandhian of Tamil Nadu. With those few words, I would again like to take this opportunity to welcome Mr. T.S. Krishnamurthy to today's conversation. Mr. Krishnamurthy, vanakkam. Thank you for joining us today. You're on mute, Mr. Krishnamurthy. Can you please unmute?
Yeah. You are able to hear me now?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah. Vanakkam and good morning to all the friends in India and good evening to Mr. Arun, who is in US at the moment. I am delighted to be taking part in this online interview. I have enjoyed my experiences with SICCI on many occasions, maybe a few years back. And thank you very much for your welcome. Thank you.
We start off into the first section, Mr. Krishnamurthy, on your expertise. You have authored a book, and the title of the book is Miracles of Democracy. The book's cover has a picture of people sitting on an elephant and also some people trying to climb onto it. Is there a specific message that you were wanting to convey?
Absolutely. In fact, when I wrote the book, we were really looking for a telling message on the cover page. And I located this particular photograph because it gives a message to the people of India and the world at large that how difficult it is to conduct elections in India. It has a combination of technology as well as old methods of going to the booths, taking the electronic voting machine. In some places we take it on the elephant back, in some places we take it on the camel back, and so on. In some places we take it by helicopter. So it's a very unique experience to conduct elections in a country like India, where we had at that point of time nearly 700,000 polling booths at various places with the different climates and so on. But it has been a unique experience, and we are very proud that the Indian Election Commission, maybe might have been some small aberrations, but Indian Election Commission over the years has developed enough expertise, enough competence to hold elections of this kind of a monumental size. In fact, one of my friends always says it's the eighth wonder of the world that we are able to conduct elections without interruption, and more so when our neighbors, all of them, had interrupted democracy. They said that some but they are not inherent in the conduct that and so on.
Mr. Krishnamurthy, we are having a little trouble with your audio. Bhavani, are you able to hear clearly, or are you also facing the same? Your audio got.
Hear him clearly.
I'm okay.
Bhavani, can you hear Mr. Krishnamurthy clearly?
No, sir. There is a break in the
Yeah, Mr. Krishnamurthy, your audio was it was breaking quite a lot the last minute or so.
I find everything seems to be normal. I don't know what has happened.
Yeah, now it's better. Please go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. Now, all that I wanted to say is there is a definite message saying that how we are struggling to combine modern technology and actual obstacles in conducting free and fair elections. The photo on the cover page of the book clearly illustrates the difficulties experienced, and yet we have been able to have a reasonably free and fair election from the point of view of management. But I do agree there are deficiencies. There are deficiencies in the sense that political parties try to put as many obstacles as possible in the conduct of free and fair elections.
Continuing on with your book, Mr. Krishnamurthy, within your book, you have reinforced the resilience of the political system in India and belief in our democracy. What do you think are the challenges faced by our democracy, and how do you think the next generation leaders who are coming up into public service, how should they equip themselves? And also, one of my favorite topics that I always talk about is that when we look at India, it continues to be a developing country for decades together, rather than becoming a developed country even after so many years. What do you think is hampering our growth?
Well, the main reason, in my opinion, is that the political parties have not been actually conducting themselves very fairly or very reasonably, impartially. They have unfortunately been adopting methods which are not really conducive for a fair amount of democracy of a modern standard. There are many deficiencies in our system. I mean the system not of the election process, but of the method by which we are forming the government and so on. The Constitution is probably one of the most unique documents that we have. It is the largest written constitution in the world, and it has many important features in the Constitution itself. But the pity is over the years, particularly in the early 70s and onwards, there has been a standard deterioration, a gradual deterioration in political standards. And almost every issue turns out to be political in this country, with the result that there are a lot of hurdles in shaping your economic policies, and in particular to bring the public delivery of public services to the people in time. So there are many challenges both for the government and for the people. So we have to find out many areas where we have to take corrective action. I have suggested a number of reforms for the point of view of having good democratic setup, having good representatives elected, because at the moment we have a very distorted system. For example, criminals can contest elections and they can even win because our criminal justice is a prolonged time delayed action, with the result that we are not able to prevent undesirable characters coming into the government. It's a very sad feature, but there are many suggestions which have been given. But as far as functioning of the governance or the functioning of the government, the governance part of it, we have a lot of steps to take to improve the quality.
Are we getting better, in your opinion?
Well, maybe marginally better, but there are many drags as well, because unfortunately, the social structure as well as the political parties, they do not seem to realize the value of time. It's very necessary for us to give importance to the value of time in governance and ensure that people get the maximum benefit of a democratic governance.
Going on to the elections itself within our country, you have been a strong supporter of the EVMs, the electronic voting machines, but several advanced countries still do not use them. Is it because these advanced countries, the voting population is manageable, or are there any other reasons? Also, it is said that any form of manipulation in paper ballot can be proved in a court of law, as well as recounting and perfect matching of registered votes and can be checked. Whereas any manipulation of an electronic system becomes very difficult to prove in any court of law. What do you feel about this?
In my opinion, the electronic voting machine is a pride of our country. And it has many safeguards built into the system which may not be publicly disclosed. But the system is such that it's very difficult to pierce through the secrecy maintained in the machine, the safeguards or security provided for in the machine. I do agree that the earlier paper ballot system is being followed in many countries, even advanced countries. But in a country like US, it is not that they are following the ballot system. Each state has its own system of voting. Some of them have electronic machines, some of them have paper ballot, and some of them have something in between, in the sense that they need not even go to the polling booth and they can do it electronically. But the point is, in a country like our size, of having such a huge voting population, electronic voting machine is a great blessing in disguise, because we are able to conduct elections in a particular constituency the same day and ensure that the results are reasonably authentic. There are doubts raised periodically about the integrity of the electronic voting machine, but there are people which have gone to the court. I'll give you two instances where Mr. Amarendra Singh, the former Punjab Chief Minister, and our own Chief Minister Jayalalitha went up to the Supreme Court to prove that the electronic voting machine is most unreliable. And the Supreme Court gave them enough opportunity, and yet they could not prove it. Not only that, the Election Commission itself openly invited challenges. In the indiration of our IIT Delhi, who was made the chairman and who had actually cleared the electronic voting machine as a member, as the chairman of a committee appointed by DRDO. They have said that they made many attempts to see whether it can be, interfered with. In fact, Mr. Indiresan personally told me that he had employed about 40 engineers to break open that machine and find out whether there is any possibility of, interference from outside. And he has himself, the DRDO came in with a report saying that it is absolutely safe. There is no need to doubt about the integrity of the machine. Now, you asked me another question, why the Western nations are not adopting it. Yes, they do not, because probably they don't see the need for it. But there are many countries in Africa and many countries in Asia who have immense interest in the working of this machine. Of course, our own neighbor, Sikkim, we have donated our machines and they are using it. But Singapore has showed interest because they have a different system of voting. We have what is known as the first past system. The machine provides for that now. but we can adopt the machine to suit the voting election system of each country. But unfortunately, only Brazil is the other country which uses electronic voting machine, and they have not found any problem. And even in our own country, the recent elections will clearly find that the opposition parties have been able to win in spite of the allegation that the election commission may be doing certain things in favor of ruling party and so on. But I can give a positive assurance to the people of this country. There is no doubt that there is no need to doubt the integrity of this mission. I'll give one more small instance. In Mizoram, there was an instance where the political parties boycotted the election, and I was there as the chief election commissioner. And they did not participate, but at the time of counting of votes, these people barged in as representatives of the political party. They pounded all the machines, broke it into pieces, and said the counting should not be done. But I had told the Mizoram chief electoral officer to bring all the broken machines, seal them in the presence of opposition parties, and bring them on to Delhi. And in the presence of national parties representatives, including Communist Party of India, we were able to decode the results of the machine and announce the result. And there is no need at all to doubt the integrity. In fact, in recent times, they have added safeguards like, voting trail to be examined. The voter himself can see in the machine how the voting has been cast. And I have no doubts at all about the integrity of these machines.
Very convincing answer, Mr. Krishnamurthy, and I think that means a lot to everybody hearing this. It now leads us into the next very important topic, in my opinion. இப்போ நம்ம நாட்டை பார்த்தீங்கன்னாக்கா இந்தியாவாக இருக்கட்டும், எந்த மாநிலத்தை வேணாலும் இருக்கட்டும், தமிழ்நாட்டிலே கூட அந்த மாதிரி தான் இருக்கு. எப்போ பார்த்தாலும் நம்ம எலெக்ஷன் மோட்ல தான் இருக்கிறோம். ஏதாவது ஒரு எலெக்ஷன் வந்துட்டு இருக்கு, and அதுக்கு வந்து ஈச் பொலிட்டிக்கல் பார்ட்டி ஹேஸ் வேரியஸ் திங்ஸ் டு சே அபவுட் அதர் பொலிட்டிக்கல் பார்ட்டிஸ், and we are spending so much of time just in our electoral process. There has been a lot of talk about one nation, one election. Now, the central government itself is talking about one nation, one ration, one nation, and they are trying to bring about so many different unifications. Won't this one nation, one election save us enormous amount of time and money, in addition to governments concentrating on governance itself rather than fighting elections? This will definitely be extremely beneficial for us, isn't it? And if so, do you think we have the capacities to be able to execute?
So theoretically, one nation, one election is the most attractive proposition for any election management body, because it removes many problems. Conducting an election state-wise at different periods, you have to go through 2 or 3 things. One is the model code of conduct observance. The other one is watching the campaigning, whether they follow the methods, the code of conduct prescribed by the election commission. They have also to see that a lot of time is spent in organizing the election for the state and the center separately. So there are practical difficulties. There are law and order issues for the election commission to manage. And so if you ask me a straight question, is it desirable? I would say yes, certainly desirable. But is it practicable? Certainly not as of now. Because first of all, we follow the Westminster style of parliamentary democracy, where the government can be voted out of office at any point of time if there is vote of confidence successfully carried out. So long as you have this system of government being defeated on the floor of the house due to vote of confidence, you cannot have a fixed tenure for the parliament or the legislative body. In America, it is a fixed tenure, so it is possible that can have one time, one election, one nation, one election. But in our country, unless and until this constitutional impediment is removed, it will not be possible. But there have been other suggestions like, bunching all the elections in 1 year on a particular day instead of having different elections in different days. In fact, the Parliamentary Standing Committee, headed by, I think, Mr. Nachimuthu, had suggested that at least bunching should be done as far as possible. I agree, as an interim measure, it is possible to bunch the elections and carry on and hold the elections so that at least in each year, a particular period of time is reserved for conduct of election. The remaining period is let off for both for the people as well as the government to do their business. But here again, there are certain difficulties, because first of all, you should have enough armed forces, paramilitary forces, for us to guard our election process, because in our country, the political parties are, unfortunately resorting to too much of hatred and violence, conflicts, and so on. So we need extra paramilitary forces to ensure, because many state governments, polices, are unfortunately accused of being biased. Even somehow the state government, the ruling party says its own police is biased in certain cases. So they themselves ask for central paramilitary forces, some of the state government. So we have a dilemma as to how to manage all these polling booths by central paramilitary forces. So if we can get over these difficulties, it is possible. But the constitutional amendment is the most important requirement before you can go ahead. But as a administrative person, I would certainly say it is possible and desirable. If you can at least bring it over a phased period, it may not be possible to enforce it in our particular year, because even if you bring a constitutional amendment, is it possible to hold the election, the first election, combined with all the states and the center? No, because they have different periods, the tenure already existing. So some state legislatures will complain that our time is either cut short or extended because you are fixing a definite date. So even if you want to introduce one nation, one election, even with a constitutional amendment, it has to be a phased process, but you have to work at least 5 to 10 years in advance.
You were sent by the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, as advisor to Ethiopia and Georgia. What was your role here, and what are your feedback from what you experienced?
As you are aware, I belong to the Indian Revenue Service, directly dealing with direct taxes in our government. I have been, I started with my career in Chennai, and then I went to Delhi and so on. And they did, International Monetary Fund had a panel of tax experts to advise other countries. I happened to be in the panel in IMF. So they asked me to go to government of Ethiopia and advise their finance minister on tax reforms. Yes, I was there for 6 months, and in fact, they wanted me to continue, but I had to come back because I was appointed secretary to the government of India in between. So I left my assignment there after 6 months. But the point is, they had very crude system of taxation, and they had 24 direct taxes. And I have suggested a combination of all these taxes, or amalgamation of all these taxes into one or two, if possible, so that the administration could be more effective and so on. And Ethiopia is a peculiar place, perhaps historically, because they have never been colonized, and it is a very strange country, but they're very proud of their national, history. And so they were wanting to bring about changes without giving an impression that it is being influenced by any outside agency. So I had to do a very delicate job there. But fortunately, the IMF gave me enough opportunity to make the suggestions and changes in a phased manner. And I thought it was a good assignment that I went through. And I also went to Georgia, which is one of the former CIS states, one of the USSR states. And they too had certain practical difficulties. So we also suggested, along with a Turkish expert on the subject, we suggested certain changes in the tax system. So it was mainly a tax reform assignment. And we did give a periodical reports both to the IMF and to the government. And some of them have been implemented and some of them have not been.
We now move on to the second section of today's conversation on your organization as well as your role within your organization. I'd like to start off by requesting Mr. S. Manikandan, who's a member of our Economic Affairs Committee, to kindly go ahead and ask his question. Mr. Manikandan, if you are online, please turn on your video and go ahead.
Morning, sir.
Very good morning.
Thank you, Mr. President, for having put this together. Sir, you've had a very illustrious career. So we're all eager to learn more from your experiences. It's been very interesting to hear from you. I would like to understand if you would like to quote any of your interesting incidents while your tenure as a CEO. You would have come across several incidents. Anything that you in particular want to quote?
Well, though I belong to the Indian Revenue Service, I went on deputation to many organizations, including Hindustan Shipyard Limited, Visakhapatnam. I also was in the Ministry of Finance, Department of Expenditure, where I had to deal with the expenditure proposals of all the ministries of Government of India. We had to recommend measures for bringing about changes and so on. I was also in the Ministry of Shipping, where an organization called Shipping Development Fund Committee, which is no more continuing now. It has been taken over by a separate organization now. And we used to lend money at a concessional rate for the Indian shipping tonnage to be improved and so on. So I have had a fairly variegated experience. And I must say I enjoyed every posting that I was offered, including a training assignment at Nagpur. We have the training college for the Indian Revenue Service officers. Now you asked me for very interesting anecdotes. Well, when I was in certain posts, even as an undersecretary, I had a very interesting confrontation with my minister. That was the first confrontation I had with a politician. You know, there was a letter from one of the taxpayers in Bombay where it was mentioned, I can't give the detailed names to you, where it was mentioned that we must help this particular taxpayer. There is a proposal to prosecute them. We should not prosecute this person because they have helped our party substantially in the matter of whatever field that we are working. So I had examined all this in the file, and then I had put up my note saying that we should go ahead with prosecution. The minister called me. I was hardly about 27, 28 years old. I was probably immature also. But I went and told him, what is the wrong that you have found in my examination or my putting up the papers or going ahead with the prosecution? He said, who asked you to put this paper in the file? The minister. I told him, please tell me why I should not put the paper in the file. Again, probably not a normally pliant civil servant would ask such a question to the minister. The minister got more furious. He said, when there is something in reference to my political party, how can you put it in the file? Then I told the minister, please look at the paper where you have said facts, please, and you have signed it. And in central government, in the Ministry of Finance, all the papers are docketed in the movement register, from the minister to the chairman to the finance secretary or revenue secretary, the joint secretary, and I was a small undersecretary, small in the cog in the machine. I said, when you have put facts, please, and when it has traveled through all the document, all the hierarchy in the finance ministry, I have no choice but to put the paper on the file and give my thoughts. And of course, it was all supported by my bosses. But if I have not put the paper on the file, I can be hauled up for destroying a public document. And he kept quiet, looked at me very annoyingly, and he said, you can go. I came out. This is the first confrontation I had. I was wondering, maybe I would have been, next order would come for me to be transferred from the finance ministry, but it didn't happen. Fortunately, the minister didn't know how to proceed further in this regard, so he let me off. But there have been many occasions where I had confrontation with my ministers. And fortunately, I had good bosses, including even good prime minister, because once I had a big confrontation with my own minister. And the minister rang me up sometime in the evening and said, please pass this order by this evening, you should immediately implement them. I put up a note, 3 pages note, saying that it is not possible to implement this order. And he calls me in the night. I'm sorry, I'm unable to disclose the name of the minister because he's still living. He's a very active political person. He rings me up in the night at around 11 o'clock and said, have you passed the order? I said, no, I have not passed the order. Sent you the file, have you not seen it? And he did talk to me a little later and said, but in fact, he happened to be from Tamil Nadu, unfortunately. He told me, நீங்க வந்து எல்லாம் ஒன்றும் பண்ண முடியாதுன்னு போட்டிருக்கீங்களே அப்படின்னு. ஆமா, என்னால பண்ண முடியாது. அது கடைசி சென்டென்ஸ் பார்க்கலையா நீங்க அப்படின்னு கேட்டேன். என்ன எழுதிருக்கீங்கன்னு படிச்சாரு. நீங்க படிக்காது அப்படின்னு. If in spite of the above objections, the minister wants this to be done, he should give written instructions which will of course be implemented. He said, நான் எப்படி இதை அப்ரூவ் பண்றேன், நீங்க சொன்னதை நான் எப்படி டிஸ்அப்ரூவ் பண்றது அப்படின்னாரு. நான் சொன்னேன், அது உங்களோட இஷ்டம். But one thing I want to tell you, if you do a wrong thing, you can be hauled up in the court. I don't want to do certain things which is illegal or improper. உங்களுக்கு அது ரைட்னு தோணுச்சுன்னா நீங்க எழுதுங்க, நான் வந்து இம்ப்ளிமெண்ட் பண்றேன். பட் certainly if the matter goes to the court, it is for you to answer. I will not be able to support you அப்படின்னு உடனே அந்த ஃபைலை திருப்பி அனுப்பிச்சிட்டார் கையெழுத்து போடாம. So there are a number of such instances. In fact, there was once a proposal to amend the company law, and my minister said these amendments are unwanted, but the Prime Minister's office or Cabinet Secretary wanted this to be brought before the Cabinet. So we brought all the changes to the Cabinet meeting. My minister was opposing all the amendment and said we are against it. But Mr. Yashwant Sinha, of course I can mention his name because it's not controversial now. He said, let us hear the Company Affairs Secretary on subject. Because everybody in the government knew that I was differing from my minister on many occasions. So I stood up for about 15 minutes and spoke about the need to bring about all these amendments and how it would be beneficial to the shareholders and to the company in private sector management, because we had proposed to hand over most of the issues which are coming to government for approval, including approval for the remuneration and so on. We said we will even intercorporate mergers, etc. We leave it to the shareholders to decide. Why should we unnecessarily get involved in this? Let the shareholders decide all these issues. So I said we should go ahead with it. But the Prime Minister asked the minister, are you still not convinced? He said, no, we are not convinced. Then the Prime Minister ordered a subcommittee to be appointed of 3 cabinet ministers, and these 3 cabinet ministers should come back within 2 days, next cabinet meeting, and we should consider whether these amendments are necessary or not. My own minister was also in the committee, but he didn't attend the subcommittee meeting. The other 2 ministers, they recommended all the amendments to be carried out. And so it came before the cabinet in a couple of days. Then the Prime Minister asked my minister, what do you say to this? He said, no, I do not agree, and I do not share the views expressed by the committee. But the Prime Minister said the majority of the cabinet is in favor of these changes. We'll go ahead with these changes. Probably this is, I don't know whether it is only one instance where the Secretary to the Government of India differed from the minister in a cabinet meeting. Because normally in a cabinet meeting, you don't differ from the minister. But this is the only occasion, in my opinion, where I could tell the cabinet that it is desirable to go ahead with all these measures which were meant for loosening the control of the government over the management of the companies in India. And it was passed through and it was amended and so on. So there are many such occasions where probably I had my differences with the minister became so public that it came in the newspaper, in the Economic Times, as well as in a magazine called Sunday, which was published in those days from Calcutta. And there was a proposal to shift me. And the Prime Minister called me and said, Mr. Mayor, your minister seems to be terribly annoyed with you. I said, yes, we have been differing for quite some time. But if you have any problem, you can transfer me, I told him. I cannot be a party to do certain things which are patently either illegal or improper. He said, if you feel that there is no placement for me because I do not belong to the AS, you may think that only certain placements are possible, and if it is not available, I'm willing to put in my papers. But I was lucky, I must say. The Prime Minister said, you won't go, the minister will go. The minister went. In fact, the government fell later and so on. So these are many such instances. In fact, many civil servants who were working along with me, they used to ask me, will you openly defy the minister like this in any meeting that we have? I said, I have no problem. I'm not looking for any favor from any of them. And in fact, I told the Prime Minister, I'm willing to go because I have no big commitment. I can certainly survive. So probably these things influenced the minister when I was selected as for the Election Commission. Here again, it was a very interesting episode. The Principal Secretary of the Prime Minister asked me to come to his room, and I went there. And he said, how about becoming Election Commissioner? I said, are you sure I'm the right person? Because first of all, I've never done any election work. And secondly, politicians and I do not get along well. So he said, it is only for this precise reason the Prime Minister selected your name. So would you like to join? I said, give me some time, a couple of hours. I'll think over and let you know. After 2 hours, I consulted my wife because she was asthmatic and Delhi winter doesn't suit her. But she said, go ahead, we'll accept it. So I told the Prime Minister's Principal Secretary, and he said, if you say yes, within an hour, the Prime Minister will see you. So I was called to the Prime Minister's office. He spoke to me for about 15-20 minutes, the Prime Minister. But he didn't tell me about the Election Commission post at all. He just asked me about my career, about my batchmates in the various services and so on. Had a cup of tea and came out. And I asked one of the secretaries to the Prime Minister, is it the job offer or is it there or not? I asked him. And then, is it worthwhile to take it up? So that man was, fortunately, I knew him, one Mr. Anandarajan. He was one of the personal secretaries to the Prime Minister. He said, no, sir, we are very proud that your name has been selected, and it is equivalent to the Supreme Court judge and also equivalent to the ministers of the cabinet. And you should not say, you should accept it. And we are very happy that they have selected you. Then he showed me the warrant of president as to the ranking that we have and so on. So I did, and it all came on a platter. I have never gone, I don't know, many of you know how Delhi functions. Many people go and canvass for themselves, they go to the minister, they go to the party people. One of the things I strictly followed is never became close to any politician, to any political party. And I maintained a respectable distance. And I'm very proud of that. And I'm glad things came to me on a platter. But it may not happen to everybody. Some people may have the wrong Prime Minister who may have accepted the resignation or transfer or whatever. So, but I must say that I had a very enjoyable innings in the government, wherever I worked, and I was willing to accept even posts which are not considered very attractive for certain people. Like, I was in audit, I was in training and so on. So, in short, I must say, every bit of, though I was originally in a private sector, I was in the Bank of India Limited. It was not nationalized at that time when I joined them. I was hardly 19 and a half. And I came to the government on a clear indication that I would like to work in the civil service. I'm talking about 1960s. These days, there may not be so many people wanting to join the civil service because there are attractive opportunities elsewhere. But I was very clear in my mind. I left the private sector, joined the government. And I must say, every post that I held, I enjoyed it. And I have never, ever compromised on the ethics part of it.
Thank you very much for sharing those experiences, Mr. Krishnamurthy. Appreciate that. Considering the time, we now move on to the third section of today's program, your career path. I would like to request a student, Miss Eunice, who's a research scholar at MCC, to please go ahead. Eunice, if you're online, please turn on your video and go ahead with your question.
Good morning, sir.
Very good morning.
So I'm Eunice,
Eunice,
I'm
we cannot
research
see you.
scholar.
We cannot see you, Eunice. Eunice?
Sir, can you see me now?
No, not yet.
Your video is not coming. Yeah.
Sir, I think some technical issue. I'm not having
Okay,
Okay,
network.
please go ahead with your question.
Yes, sir. So good morning. I'm Eunice, research scholar from Madras Christian College. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And sir, you started career as a bank probationary officer. What inspired you to take up IRS? And you have held different leadership positions, sir. So which demand technical as well as non-technical skills? How did you develop them, sir? And who were your role models and what qualities of them inspired you, sir?
Well, when I joined the Bank of India, in those days it was a fairly prestigious post. Actually, even in the interview, the chief executive of the Bank of India Limited, one Mr. T.D. Kansara, he asked me this question. You have received gold medals and so on. Won't you be joining the civil service? He asked me. So, of course, I gave a very, what should I say, evasive reply, saying that if the bank job is attractive, why should I go to the civil service? So that's how I came out, and he, in fact, looked at my medals and the cash prizes that I had received and all that. He said, we are certainly recruiting you. But in fact, there's another story behind it. They gave the interview date on a day when I was having the convocation. So I went and told the Bank of India people, can you change the date? They said, no, we cannot, but you will consider whether it is possible or not. But then I wrote a letter, inland letter to the chief executive from a Matunga post office on my way from Baroda to Mysore, where the convocation was there, saying that it's an important event in my life. You have given me an interview date exactly coinciding with my convocation date. And if you are not going to change it, but I'm going ahead with the convocation, and if you are interested in me, please give me a change of date. And I wrote it to the chief executive. I got a reply within 3 days saying that we are changing the date and you should come and attend the interview. So this is again a very interesting anecdote. And I joined the Bank of India. In those days, Bank of India was one of the prestigious banks. And we used to work sometime even up to 12 o'clock in the midnight. But I was not worried on that account. But somehow or other, right from my childhood, there was a number of people in our family who were in the civil service. And the people used to talk even in public about the importance of being a collector, importance of being a government official dealing with the public and so on. Probably I was influenced by those considerations. And I had made up my mind to write the civil services examination and get into the government service. In fact, I can say that I missed my IAS only by 4 marks. And the reason was, it is only a afterthought, I would say. But in Bombay, they used to change the examination centers every day. And when I applied for the job, it was from Madras, where I was working in Bank of India. By the time the civil service exam was to be held, I was transferred to Bombay. And I was not familiar with the Bombay, and being a young man at that age, I found it probably to reach examination center on one of the days. And I went late by half an hour when I had to negotiate with the invigilator to permit me to enter into the hall. But anyhow, be that as it may, I missed the IAS by 4 marks and I got into the civil service, the Indian Revenue Service. And I was quite happy with that, but my father was not. In fact, he felt that I should have continued in Bank of India and he thought I would have become probably the chairman of the bank and so on. Maybe he was a government servant and probably he thought that government servant doesn't give much of an opportunity for much of initiative and so on. But in frankness, I must say, now after retirement, I would say, government gives enormous opportunities for showing discretion, for showing, my efficiency and integrity and so on. In fact, I may even go to the extent of saying, you can be absolutely straightforward only in the government. It may not be possible in the non-governmental sector because for various reasons. So if you are independent and if you are having a straightforward approach, nobody really can shake. In fact, I always used to remember the Tirukural verse that says, so long as you are honest and straightforward and ஒழுக்கத்தை கடைபிடிச்சா நிச்சயமா ஒத்துரி உங்களை கடவுளே வந்து உங்களுக்கு வணங்குவாருங்கிற மாதிரி ஒரு திருக்குறள் இருக்கு. I used to follow that particular Tirukural, and I was never wavering, and I decided to take it up. Initially, my father wasn't happy about it, but later on he got reconciled to it. And even in joining the government service, he wanted me to join either railways or the police service where my father and my grandfather had worked. But it seems it was an irony that I had not given that preference. I had given preference for the next to foreign service. I had given preference for Indian Revenue Service and Audit Record Service. So that's how I got into the Indian Revenue Service. But I can, without any hesitation, say that government service gave me a lot of satisfaction. I don't know how many of you know, when I was in the government, I had met many people from various parts of the country. And I used to tell them, when they meet me, even particularly from Madras, they used to come lawyers and chartered accountants. I used to tell them, take the order this evening itself. We don't have to stay in the hotel for one more day. I used to give my orders. If I meet them in the morning, even in the afternoon, I give the orders immediately, and the letter will be given to them personally. So if it is possible to take decisions quickly and communicate, I think you earn a lot of goodwill. And I have, I have letters of appreciation from all over the country, particularly in the Election Commission. Whenever somebody wrote to me a letter, to personally addressing it by name, I insisted on writing it, reply myself under my signature. Although in the government, normally the practice is some undersecretary or deputy secretary will reply the letters addressed to an official by name. So I practice these things to give us some kind of a human approach. And I have letters from Bihar, from Calcutta, and UP, how we can bring about transformation in communication with the public, the government and the public. And I'm very conscious that I took this decision. I'm very proud that I took the decision to join the government. And I enjoyed every bit of an assignment that I had. And I would recommend, particularly young students like you, to join the civil service and bring about these changes. Because in a country like, for example, in UK, the public service functions differently. They communicate with the people quickly and so on. So we want good people to join the government service, not people who show the arrogance of power, but the humility of serving people. And you get an enormous opportunity to serve the people all over the country. And that gives you a tremendous satisfaction. So being a student, but I would only say don't join government service at lower levels. You must join one of these services where you can show a lot of independence, a lot of discretion, a lot of assertions to ensure that the public gets the benefit that the government is supposed to give. So in short, government service at top levels is good to take. At lower levels, I won't say unless and until you have no choice of any other job, you can go. But as far as lower levels are concerned, probably private sector is much better because your services will be appreciated much more and probably you can distinguish yourself, show initiative and so on. But on the whole, I will say a lot of young, honest, independent people should get into the government service and improve the whole complexion of delivery of public services.
Wonderful inputs, Mr. Krishnamurthy. Completely appreciate that. And I hope every student watching us, as well as whoever is going to see this recording in the future, also gain from it. As CEC, Chief Election Commissioner, Mr. Krishnamurthy, you were appointed observer to the US presidential elections in 2004 and also the elections in Zimbabwe. How do you think these elections are different from ours, especially the conduct of the candidates who are standing for election?
Well, although my CV says I attended these two countries, I did attend a few others like Russia when Mr. Putin was elected as the president. I went to Uganda, and a few other countries as member of the Commonwealth panel of observers. Well, all these countries have their own peculiarities because, first of all, they function under a different constitution and that the system of election can be different. But I will refer to one or two incidents. For example, in the US, each state has got a separate election commission. There is no uniform central election commission organizing and conducting the elections. That is one point. And each state has got a Supreme Court, as you are aware, perhaps. And also, each state has a different method of choosing the candidates. And then, along with the presidential election, a few other issues also will be placed before the voters. For example, I remember in one of the constituencies which I attended, they wanted the people to vote on whether a library should be set up in a particular constituency in a particular place and so on. So people vote not merely for presidential election. There are even municipal election issues, etc. But as you know, it is a presidential form of government. And their constitution permits combining all these issues to be placed before the people at the same time. And because of the variation that they have, there are a lot of confusions available. In fact, when the US panel interviewed me on this, I told them we have a different system. But then whether the federating states, whether they would agree for a uniform election system or not. But at least there can be at least some more uniformity in the system of election. But each state has its own system, and I do not think any of the federating unit will agree for a change. But they have introduced what is known as Election Assistance Commission, where it is set up in the US, and they monitor only the financing part of the election, where they have brought about some kind of an uniformity. So this is the position as far as US is concerned. And they don't have electronic voting machine all over. In certain states, it is there. And then, even the election will be almost like a festival. People even play their, music channel and they walk to the electoral booth and so on. Similarly, in Russia as well, but Russia was totally different. You can see people going, but there is no much of a campaign or much of a hatred or much of a party disputes and so on. I remember in Russia, Moscow, when I went to a polling booth, they were having their some beer or something, and they were also having a music in the in the polling booth. So in Africa, for example, where I went to Uganda and Zimbabwe, they have a different system. In fact, for example, we have a inking on the finger, but they have to dip their hand with the palm into some liquid that will not immediately disappear, and that is supposed to be the process of ensuring identification of the voter. So anyhow, as far as the system is different, they are different. It varies from place to place, from country to country. But I think in a country of our size, the system that we follow, in my opinion, seems to be working very well, except there are changes that are required. For example, we don't have a law regulating political parties. In many of the countries, they have a law regulating political parties. We have an election commission which has been set up under the Constitution. In no country of the world, including the American Constitution, there is no election commission set up as a part of the constitutional provision. It also gives enormous power and independence to the election commission, because the chief election commissioner can be removed only by impeachment. Although there is some legal confusion about the other election commissioners, because there is a provision in the constitution they can be recommended to be removed. That's a big issue, and on which I will not need not spend much of a time. But our election commission is unique in its own way. It has been given the rank of a Supreme Court judge, the members, and they can be removed by impeachment only. Not only that, there is a Supreme Court decision in Manohar Singh Gill versus Union of India, where the Supreme Court said if in the conduct of the election there are situations where there is no provision of law, or what they call it as legislative vacuum, the election commission is free to take, the chief election commissioner cannot throw his hands in despair and appeal to God. He should go ahead and take his own decision, so long as it is in broad spirit, in concurrence with the Constitution and the legislative provisions relating to the elections. So that kind of an authority has been given. So sometimes people say election commission is almighty. Mr. Session probably brought up a lot of changes. People thought that the election commission is almighty. It is not as almighty as many people think. There are limitations, because first of all, we have the Representation of People's Act, and there are also provisions of the articles in Constitution. The election commissioner cannot do anything on his own. These are the provisions within which he has to work. But there are procedural issues where probably he can take decisions in the interest of free and fair elections. So these are some of the salient features of the Indian system, which are not there in any part of the country. But I would still say that we need immediately and urgently a law regulating political parties. If we can have a law relating partnership, relating to companies, I see no reason why we should not have a separate law governing the working of the political parties. And we have recommended this many times. The Law Commission has recommended. Justice Venkatacharya Commission, which went into the review of the Constitution, has suggested. But it is very sad, that I feel very bad about it, that there is no government, whether it is the previous government or the present government, they have given any serious thought to bring about this change. There is an urgent need. And also the second important change that I would urgently recommend is the system of election. Now people can get elected with the 20%, 25% votes polled. That means the remaining 75% of the people are not represented by these people, because a person with the 20 to 25% votes can easily get it from his community, from his caste, from his language group. With the result, you will find the representatives have a narrow-minded representation to make. In fact, Mr. Edmund Burke mentioned to the voters of Bristol in one of his appeals, he said, elect such of these people who represent your constitutional interest whenever there is a need for improvement in your constituency. But if there is a conflict between constituency interest and the national interest, you will elect such representatives who will vote for the national interest. So this cannot be achieved with the present system of first past post system, where anybody, even with one difference of one vote, can get elected. So these are two issues which need to be urgently addressed, and I feel somebody should take it up very seriously. I have, of course, been doing it in all public meetings, in my writings and so on.
We're now going to move on to the fourth section of today's program, Mr. Krishnamurthy, that is your inputs for the next generation. I must say that quite a lot of your experiences are certainly gripping, to say the least. And as much as we would like to spend a lot of time, I just realized that we've already finished an hour.
I understand.
So
Yeah.
we might
In
have
fact,
to
it's a very interesting interview, I must say, because.
Thank you. So we might have to reduce some of our questions so that we are able to curtail the time. So that is why I'm also moving a bit faster. Moving on to the next generation, in your inputs for the next generation, I would like to request our senior executive committee member, Mr. A.L. Chidambaram, to please go ahead with his question. Mr.
Yeah,
ALC,
good morning to you. Good morning to you.
please turn on your video, Mr. ALC. Can you please turn on your video?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, you are able to hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Good morning to Krishnamurthy and to the President.
Good morning.
And my question is, will society inclusion right from secondary level of education give our youth better understanding of government and motivate them to be responsible voters?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chidambaram, for your question. Yes, I think the education system in our country is unfortunately textbook oriented or exam oriented. It is necessary to cultivate our youngsters even from, I would say, even from the secondary school or primary school onwards. The need to observe certain civic responsibilities gradually over a period of time, inculcate in them values of public service, values of contribution to the society and so on. Although some of the individual teachers may be doing this kind of a service to the student community or the younger generation, and there is no systematic approach as far as educating them on the responsibilities as a citizen of this country. For example, in Australia, they have a nice system. In fact, I tried to bring it out, but unfortunately, I didn't have enough time to implement that. But we did have it. We had a museum-like thing established in Delhi, where we invited all the school children to have a look at the election process, how the great leaders voted, how the constitutional founders of the constitution had given so much of value to the role of the election commission, the role of election, and so on. So these are the things which you need to go to the younger generation. Although I would say probably at the collegiate level, many of them have come to know it. But even there, I feel politics seems to have got into the college education. With the result, the students are divided on party lines, which again, I do not approve at all. I think till they take up a position in life, they should not take any party line. They can have opinions. Absolutely, they can have whatever opinion they want to have. But they should not take part in active political life till they finish their education. It will not only affect the quality of education, it will not only affect performance in your educational field, but also brand you, identify you. I find some of the universities, but unfortunately, the students are divided on political lines. This is not a very healthy trend at all. I think something needs to be done to ensure that till they may be having the voting rights at 18th year, but that does not give you the authority to get into active political life because you're not very mature at that age. You need to know how governments function, how the constitution works in a country, and so on. So this is one area probably there is a need to educate, to change basic inputs to the students, maybe at the high school level onwards. But they should also be educated on the responsibilities, for example, the fundamental rights and duties that we have in the Constitution. These need to be taught to the children. So I feel sorry when some of the innocent children, they get killed, they get subject to victims of accusations and so on. It's not a very happy and healthy state of affairs. So we need to seriously look at the need for political education, but not political participation among the students at the high school level onwards. And there are many measures available. There are a lot of education series, there are civic responsibilities. They should be taken to the city local council, they should be taken to the village panchayat. They should know what is happening. Because these educated people are going to be the leaders of tomorrow, and they should have a lot of patience, a lot of understanding, a lot of tolerance. And the way in which the political parties are conducting themselves today, I am the most disappointed person.
On the other side of what you just said, Mr. Krishnamurthy, here's another point. We today, in today's age, we talk about smartphones, we talk about smart watches, and we talk about Internet of Things, and a whole array of various smart devices. When only will we start seeing smart voters? And the reason why I say that is even today, most votes are cast based on personalities or caste of a particular candidate or money. We don't see the voters being really smart. So how do we create this awareness among voters to be smart and execute their constitutional duty?
Although the Election Commission has been encouraging a lot of civil society organizations to spread the message of electoral responsibilities and voting responsibility and so on, it has really not reached all corners of this country, particularly the rural side and so on. So it is necessary for both the Election Commission, the Government of India, and the state government to spread the need for the voters to be participate in the election, to exercise their votes impartially, and to understand the candidates standing for the elections. Although the Supreme Court has issued a directive that the candidate information should be made available to the voters and they should reach the people to judge. Even now, a lot of people against whom the criminal cases are pending, people are being voted into office. This is something which not at all desirable. So it is necessary for the voters to be educated that, and also the law probably should disqualify people who have been charged with serious offences. And one of the recommendations that I had made to the Prime Minister in July 2004 was to see that in cases where a candidate is nominated, the candidate should not be nominated by the political parties. If a person has been charged with a prima facie charge sheet by the court in respect of serious offences like rape, murder, and so on. But today, any person even if there is a case pending in the court, because they take 10 to 15 years to decide these issues, they get elected and they spoil the political scenario of this country. And there are some people who, they are getting convicted, but they continue to be the leader of the party. I don't want to mention names, but there are people who are convicted and they still continue to be the leader of the party. These are very undesirable features of Indian democracy, and the society should be educated. And also, the political parties should come together to bring about minimum changes in the law, in addition to the separate law on political parties. Certain amendments are necessary to ensure that there is a healthy conduct of elections and the voters are also having the freedom to go and exercise the election. For example, there will be a lot of criticism about money being distributed. When cash is distributed to the voters, or the voters, some of them at least, they get influenced by this and they exercise. And some people say that can get money from as many candidates as possible and exercise your vote. So these are not issues which should be allowed to be continued. In fact, I have suggested a system to see that no political party is allowed to spend any money on the election. You should have a national election fund. The corporates and the individuals can contribute, they get 100% tax exemption. So that the National Election Fund, which will be administered by the Election Commission, not by the Government of India or by the state government, by the Election Commission. These will be distributed to the candidates. So today, an ordinary poor man cannot successfully stand in any election in this country, whether it is panchayat election or local corporation election or state election and so on. They need money. And this money, they depend upon so many people, some questionable, criminal, and even people with no public service record. And they get influenced. And naturally, when they get money from them, they have to take decisions in their favor. So the nexus between the corporates and the political parties has to be snapped. That can be done only by a national election fund. The companies can contribute to the fund. Tata did contribute something like a Tata Charitable Trust for political parties, but that is only within their own group. But what I am suggesting is have a national election fund. allow people to contribute. Initially, it may not be adequate to conduct the election, but over a period of time, you can build a corpus and we can also distribute. So long as there is a difference between the actual expenditure and the money available in the National Election Fund, the government should provide assistance to the Election Commission. But it will not be related to any candidate or to any political party. So this will substantially snap the obnoxious nexus between the political parties and the funders. And the present system of electoral bonds, in my opinion, is a fraud on the people of India. They say it is half transparent. It is like crossing half the well. You cannot say just because the money comes through the bank, it is transparent. The black money does come through the electoral bond, and some political parties have unfair advantage over others. So this must be snapped, and a separate measure should be brought about. And if you bring all these changes, in fact, I have given 24 recommendations. Law Commission has given certain recommendations, but the political parties should come together. There are minimum changes which can be done through a legislative change to the Representation of People's Act, where only a simple majority is required. Constitutional amendment may require a 2/3 majority, but simple majority, many changes can be brought about, and the political system of this country can be made safe for the future generations of this country. If you do not do it, the way in which the parties are conducting themselves, the way in which the candidates are, corrupting the system, I do not have much of a hope for the success of democracy. And one more thing I may like to say is, your democracy has got a suicidal tendency. If you have a corrupt democracy, a dictator will emerge, successfully using the democratic institutions like Hitler did. So we have to be extraordinarily careful. The country and the people should be vigilant to realize the need to bring about these changes. The suggestions are available. It is only to be implemented, maybe after a discussion with all the political parties. And I will only appeal to all the political parties. And I will also appeal to the students and the corporate people to see that these things are spread, and there is no need for corrupting the system through the donations and so on. So with all these changes, I do hope democracy can be saved. It is not that it is a depressing figure. There are certain advantages. We have been able to survive without any interruption, except for a brief emergency, which was for 2 years. But we have had a successful growth of democracy in this country. But what we need as the years change, as technology changes, as people are becoming more and more educated, we need to bring about changes to strengthen the quality of democracy in this country.
Absolutely, Mr. Krishnamurthy. As you rightfully said, we have been making progress as a country, but the rate of progress perhaps has to increase as more education and knowledge becomes widespread. And if that happens, I'm sure that, what you're talking about, we will be able to see light at the end of the tunnel. We certainly look forward to those extremely progressive times ahead. Mr. Krishnamurthy, that brings us to an end of today's discussion section of today's conversation. There is a second section as well that we have, which we have not informed you. We call this the rapid fire section. And here I would give you 5 words, and we would like to hear from you.
Your voice.
Can you hear me now, Mr. Krishnamurthy?
It's better now. Please, what exactly you want me to do?
Okay, so this is the next section of our session today, where it's called the rapid fire round, and I will give you 5 words. Each one of these, when I inform you each one of these words, I would like you to share with the audience what exactly comes in your mind when I mention each of these words. You don't have to worry. Each of these words are comfortable words. They're not going to put you in any discomfort. But to add to the spice of the program is why we bring this rapid fire round in. So with your permission, can we please go ahead?
Fortunately, at this age, I'm afraid your voice is breaking. That's the only thing.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, much better. Yeah.
Did you hear what I had told you earlier?
Yeah, I think the broad purpose behind what you said was heard, but I was not sure. I have no problem in answering any question you ask, or any word on which you want me to comment. No problem. Okay, I have reached the age when I really don't worry about at all.
So I will give you a word, and all that I'm looking forward from you is a word or a short phrase, nothing more than that.
Yeah.
So can we start?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the first word is democracy.
Well, democracy is probably, as Burton Russell said, it has got negative benefits, not many positive benefits. It has to be guarded well. It has to be, the only workable solution as on today, unless and until we can find an alternative. Democracy has to be very safely guarded by people. It is only ultimate the power of the people, like the polity.
The second word is elections.
Elections is good to represent, because we cannot have a direct democracy as Greek city-states had. Elections are desirable. And the conduct of elections depends not only on the election commission, but also on the government and the voters and the political parties. They need to change. All of them need to change. They have to bring about changes. Unless you periodically bring changes, corruption will enter election system and democracy will get defeated.
The third phrase rather is public service.
Well, I'm very proud of the fact that public service can be of real use to the public, provided the entrants to the public service are able to differentiate between politics and governance. And you do not have to implement whatever the minister says. And you can insist on the political masters to give instructions in public service is a noble service, like a teacher or like any medical service and so on. But provided the public servants, all of them, they display a sensitivity, an empathy, and to ensure that the poor common man on the street gets whatever is due to him.
The fourth word is religion.
Religion is purely private matter. It should never have come into politics. Unfortunately, it has come into this country. It's very sad. And I do not think that religion should be talked about in public at all, except within the community if they want to have, for example, a temple or a church or a mosque. But it should not come out of the place of worship or their own residence. But now it has come so much to the open. There's so much of conflict. I think the government should ensure that the religions are protected, but at the same time, they do not become instruments of hatred and conflict.
The last word is morality.
Well, it is a very difficult word to comment on, in the sense because morality differs from society to society. But you have your own conscience. I always tell the youngsters when I address them, address your conscience. If you have any doubt, and whatever your conscience says, do it. But ultimately, I believe in God, and I believe, whatever be the name of the God, that there is a person who is watching you all around. Whatever you may do in secrecy, it will get noted. Appropriate reward or punishment will take place.
Thank you very much, Mr. Krishnamurthy, for that very open and transparent exchange. Completely enjoyed it. It was wonderful having you with us.
Thank you. Thank you very much. May God bless you all.
Before you before you log off, Mr. Krishnamurthy, a couple of other points. Number one is we have the policy within SICCI 360, where we would like to request you to autograph your photograph so that we can keep this as part of our memorabilia. So we will have this at the. Sorry.
How do I do it? Just by hand?
No. We will send it to you. we will send it to you, and then you can autograph it and also affix today's date so that we can keep it with us. That's our request to you.
I'll do that. I'll be delighted to do that.
And the second point, Mr. Krishnamurthy, is in appreciation of your joining us today. We would like to give you a memento. This is a new policy that we follow within SICCI 360. There is what is known as the Kanchi Kamakoti Child's Trust Hospital in Chennai, in Nongumbakam. This hospital provides EO-band service to children from underprivileged families. So we have taken the liberty, Mr. Krishnamurthy, to contribute in your name to this hospital so that it can fund a underprivileged child's medical expenditure. And this is a certificate.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I was member of the advisory board of this Kanchi Kamakoti Hospital for about 5 or 6 years. So I'm aware of this hospital, and they're doing a good job.
Very good.
So they may again need some administrative changes, but it's one of the good institutions that we have in this country.
We will send this certificate as well to you for your records. Again, this is our token of our appreciation to have you with us today. I would
Very good. It's a
take
good
this
corporate
opportunity.
social responsibility.
I would also like to take this opportunity to thank the SICCI 360 committee. Without the efforts of this committee, we would not have been able to complete 2 successful years, as well as going forward as well into our third year. We've had 25 extremely esteemed guests who have joined us and shared with us their all-round paths to excellence. This committee is headed by Mrs. Valli Arun, who is the president of the Velingro Group and trustee of the Tamil Isai Sangam. The co-chair of this committee is Professor T. Murugavel, who is head of the Department Humanities and Social Sciences at SVC Chennai. He's also incidentally responsible for putting together the questions for each of our guest speakers. Mr. Gokul Santanam, Senior VP at Emphasis, is responsible for the marketing of the SICCI 360 series. Mr. Amalan Alavandar, Environment Consultant at the Asian Development Bank, is responsible for the online moderation of the SICCI 360 program. Ms. Vilasni M. Arun is a student of clinical psychology and brings in the student perspective. Mr. Vinod Solomon, Secretary, and Mrs. Bhavani Srinivasan, Assistant Secretary of SICCI, have been doing excellent work in terms of propelling this SICCI 360 series forward. With that, I would also like to share with you, friends, that the next SICCI 360 program has already been scheduled. This is with Dr. Sukhi Sivam. The date, however, is still to be confirmed. This is going to be sometime during the third week of November. I'm sure all of you will be aware, Mr. Sukhi Sivam is an orator, writer, and scholar in Tamil, as well as he's spoken severally in English as well. We will share with you the date and time at the earliest. This session is also going to be held online over our WebEx platform. So kindly look forward to our email and please join us for this session as well. This brings us to
If I make can I add a word?
Please go ahead, Mr. Krishnamurthy.
First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I have one Tirukural which I would like to reach every person, because in my opinion, that is the key to managerial success in any field. That is, Alukaru, Ava, Vehuli, Inna Sol, Vinangum Tavirtal Aram. If all of you can practice this, you will be doing a great service not only to yourself but to the society. Thank you.
Can I request you to also share the meaning of it, Mr. Krishnamurthy, for the benefit of our
Thank you very much. I am quite impressed by the initiative you have taken. I enjoyed participating, and I find a lot of planning and organization efforts have taken place in organizing such meetings. I am indeed delighted. My hearty compliments and best wishes to all of you.
Thank you. Mr. Krishnamurthy, can you please share the meaning of the Tirukural that you just mentioned?
அழுக்காருன்னா பொறாமை இருக்கக்கூடாது. அவா மீன்ஸ் பேராசை இருக்கக்கூடாது. வெகுளினா கோபம் இருக்கக்கூடாது. இன்னா சொல் ஹார்ஷ் வேர்ட்ஸ் இருக்கக்கூடாது. இந்த நாளையும் நம்ம அவாய்ட் பண்ணினோம்னாக்க நிச்சயமாக at least my rich experience tells me, because I have never used all these 4 words they represent. I have never done that. I have never got angry with anybody. I have never used harsh words. I have never felt jealous about any person. And anger, but practice this, you will succeed.
Very good. Thank you very much, Mr. Krishnamurthy. It has been wonderful having you with us. I would also like to take the opportunity to thank each of our audience for having taken the time to join us today. We have been successful only because of your participation. We certainly look forward to your ongoing participation with us. Thank you very much. Nandri, Vanakkam.